Welcome to the first video in the Homemade Harness Chronicles. Today we're going to be talking about this, which was the first saddle that I ever made from scratch. This I made to be the ideal recreational tree climbing saddle, and most of this footage is going to be pretty old because I recorded it 3 years ago when I made this saddle back when I lived in Duluth, so please enjoy. This harness that I'm wearing is one that I made entirely myself. So it was a pretty slow evolution, starting with the Matt Cornell, the Valiant Saddle Pads kit, which was a gift. My mom gave that to me as a gift, and I just loved tinkering with it and making a new harness. And slowly, all of the pieces got replaced with things that were entirely made by me. So the concept of that rope saddle is that it's just padding with loops that you can run ropes and webbing and other things through to kind of tie knots and stuff and configure your own like completely custom life support for your harness. So it's a really fun exercise in creating life support, but I got obsessed with it, and eventually we ended up here with my harness that I made specifically for recreational tree climbing that weighs nothing, and it packs down just like a recreational like rock climbing saddle. So it's not a big onerous saddle, but it still has a bridge, it has side D-rings, and it has tool accessory clips on the side, so that if you're someone who is a arborist or tree climber, it has all the things that you would want, except for the padding's a little bit lacking, so that I can tack it down nice and small, but it's still way more comfortable than any of the other rock climbing harnesses that I ever used for tree climbing. First, we'll just go through where I kind of got my inspiration for different parts of the harness, and then I'll kind of share with you how one goes about finding out that it's safe to have a harness like this. So I wanted this harness to go on as quickly as possible, just to make it easy to put on in the snow with lots of snow gear, or just easy in general to use. So we have an ISC buckle up top for that hardware, and then for the legs I did it kind of like the Monkey Beaver saddles, where they clip on the inside of your leg because it makes it much easier to step through the harness. And those are just ISC Cobra buckle, or these are Austria Alpine Cobra buckles, I think. And then the bridge is my favorite Petzl adjust bridge, using the Petzl open rings as my side pieces, and then just some Samson Velocity spliced on there to be my bridge with a ISC aluminum ring. But and then the only other hardware that's kind of special on this harness is these D-rings are ISC rings. But basically there's a lot of different harnesses that you can see here. For the most part, it was inspired by the new Tribe Onyx saddle, because I really liked the way that those leg loops were kind of like a hammock for each individual leg, because I thought that way I wouldn't need a lot of padding. This to spread out the weight, the material used was actually a Dacron sailcloth, so it's a very rigid material, and then just kind of reinforced with some lighter weight webbing and then 1-inch webbing for the primary life support. But yeah, this triangle shape, the way that this was sewn together is based off of the Courant koala harnesses, just because I liked that I would be able to switch these out easily with the Petzl open rings. It gets kind of clunky when you just run a single strap over instead of making this nice T with the webbing. And then the upper is just simple, however I went about it, because the sewing machine I have isn't a professional sewing machine, so I can't sew through a lot. So there's no padding sewn into this harness. It's just basically the nylon required for life support, and then just 2 different types of nylon with some fleece sandwiched in between them to give like a little bit of padding. But any kind of foam or anything wasn't going to be able to go through my sewing machine. So this is a super lightweight harness. This harness is just under 4 pounds. I think I just weighed it. It was like 3.8 pounds with no equipment on it. And it's super light, and it folds up really nice and tight like a rock climbing harness. So now the elephant in the room, of course, is how do I know that it's safe? How do I decide that this harness is safe to use. Now, the first thing to think about is how, like, what would our guidelines be for safe? So for tree climbing, we kind of only know the 5,400 pound or 25 kilonewton requirement for all climbing ropes. But pretty much as long as a harness is certified, then it's good, you know? That's not something that we have to think about when we're buying a harness, because they're all designed for tree climbing. But if you wanted to make your harness, what does a harness have to be able to do? So tree climbing harnesses don't have to meet really any fall arrest standards, but they do have to be strong enough. And kind of the only information I could find was the standard for rock climbing, which is 15 kilonewtons. So it's significantly less than the 25 kilonewtons that we're familiar with. So with that in mind, my goal was just to have it meet the 5,400 pounds, but knowing that if it was just a little bit short of that, then that would be fine, because these are never ever going to be, should never be shock loaded. If you're using them properly, you should never like fall into this harness. It should just support you when you're climbing, and like maybe a small like drop like here and there. So the first thing I did was I went around and I just kind of I made sure that, first of all my buckles are rated. So make sure everything that you're using is rated. I didn't use any just like random Joe Schmo buckles. All of these are ones that you'll see in either the Teufelberger harnesses or the New Tribe harnesses. But these ISC and Cobra buckles are all rated to 15 kilonewtons. And all the webbing I'm using is rated appropriately. Brown webbing is actually the webbing that's used in the New Tribe harnesses, which is good for 6,000 pounds. And the webbing that's being used for life support in these leg loops is this white webbing, which is good for 4,700 pounds. So since you're sharing the weight between each of the legs, it doesn't need to be that 5,400 pounds. It just has to cooperate in a way that'll get you to that at least 15 kilonewtons, which is about 3,600 pounds, or ideally to that 5,400 pounds. So first of all, as many things as I could, I made sure didn't have to be made by me. So for example, this really important component here that connects the waist belt to the leg loops on the harness. This is just a sewn Dyneema dog bone. So this is sewn by somebody else. I didn't have to alter it in any way, and that's rated to 22 kilonewtons. So with two of those sharing the load, that gets us well above 5,400 pounds. The girth hitch, of course, probably reduces them a little bit, but that's acceptable use. And then we have the Petzl open rings, which are both 25 kilonewtons on either side. So when we break this down, really the only thing that's being used for life support in this whole harness is that I make. So the things that I'm responsible for in this harness that I created are the sewing done on this brown webbing and the sewing that's done on these yellow webbings down here, or done on these white webbings down here. So just this brown webbing here, and then the two strips of white webbing on the edge of the leg loops is what is being used as primary life support. So each leg is rated to 4,700 pounds, and the way that I found out that I can trust my sewing is using this thread and these bar-tacks that are just done on a simple sewing machine. I've tested sewn loops on both this white webbing and this brown webbing. And with the white webbing, I think I got like around 3,000 pounds with just 5 bar tacks, I think. And with only 3 bar tacks on this brown webbing, I got to 6,000 pounds, which is or just under 6,000 pounds. I think like 5,800 maybe. Plenty good enough, because now when we look at this brown webbing, let's say that the waist belt is the most important part. Like leg loops are important to support you, but ultimately we want to be able to trust the waist belt the most. So the way I made this waist belt was we have the bitter end of the belt, which is just going through the buckle. This is being used as designed, so I don't need to do anything special here. But then when we get to the first D-ring, On this side of the D-ring, we have 3 bar tacks, which should be good for 5,600 pounds. And then on the other side, we have a couple more bar tacks. And then to form slots that tool holders can go in, this is double layered webbing that is bar tacked every so many inches all the way to the end of this harness. And you can see we have a Petzl Kara tool in this one. So because of that, we have like 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. We have 19 bar tacks that are essentially holding this buckle on, and then three holding this D-ring on, and then, you know, a bunch more reinforcing this D-ring. So that ought to be plenty good enough to the point where the webbing should fail before the entirety of all these bar tacks were to fail. And then if you look at the important sewing on these leg loops, we have basically about 5 bar tacks that we're relying on. So that's 3,200 pounds that's spread out over both the leg loops. So it pretty much meets the standards for 15 kilonewtons for just one leg. So that's definitely a lot of overkill with all that stitching, but that's kind of what you want with a tree climbing harness, because they're going to be used and abused, and this thread's going to be wore on. So having more than enough is going to be a lot better for wear reasons. You're going to be able to trust it for longer without needing to retire it. So I've been climbing on this harness a lot, and I inspect the most important bar tacks on the harness all the time before using it, and I haven't seen any issues with it wearing or anything like that. The only special consideration I haven't talked about yet is the thread type. You want to use it's a pretty large thread. It's like the biggest thread you'll be able to fit in like a standard home sewing machine, which is like a V92 thread that I think is rated to like 12 to 15 pounds that the single thread will break at. And so then with the bar tacks I did, my goal was just I would make like 2 passes of straight stitch and then do a 5mm wide zigzag stitch at I think about a 2.2 millimeter density, and do like 4 passes of that. So it's a lot of thread, probably too much thread, but it's definitely nice to have a little too much than too little. So that's about it. There's not really any weak points on here that I would worry about, and I know that it's safe for me because I went through and I tested everything as an individual component that I had to create, just like I do when I'm splicing ropes. So I know that I can trust the stitches that I used throughout this harness. But of course I could not make this harness for somebody else because I haven't brake tested this whole harness, because this whole harness took me like a year to make. So I'm not just going to break one of these just to figure out, oh, I was safe using it. I tested the individual weak points that I could create, and those were definitely plenty good enough if you're very good enough, or whatever they say, whatever Ryan says on how not to highline. But those watching Sailrite's videos on how they sew bar tacks and how they tested a bunch of people sewing slings on how not to highline. It's definitely not a recommended thing that you do, and it's not something I would recommend you do, even though this harness is technically probably cheaper than one that you could buy online. The time invested and money spent brake testing stuff definitely exceeds that savings that you would get. So even though this would technically be cheaper, to make it safe, even I guess a lot of people would maybe not consider this safe to climb on, but to feel safe climbing on it, it's still a lot of money. You're definitely better off buying your own harness. But if you are really curious like me and wanted to make something like this, you'll have to do a lot of Googling. I'm not going to share all the information about this because I'll let you look at it, and if you can interpolate how to create it from that, then go ahead. But I don't want this to exactly be a how-to video, because you should have to pursue it yourself and figure out how to do it, because otherwise you're probably not considering as many things as you should to make it as safe as possible. But this was a super fun project, and it's a really cool thing that I have now. That's this harness that I made, that I've climbed on a lot, and that I really love. It's super great for what I designed it for, which was recreational tree climbing. You know, it packs up into just the smallest possible package. I can't do this with any of my other tree climbing harnesses, just rock climbing ones, and I love it so much. It's the best harness for recreational tree climbing. So basically, I made this saddle to be the perfect recreational tree climbing saddle, and for the simple brake testing I did with it, I didn't test it as a whole unit. I tested elements of my sewing that were going to be critical to make sure that it could be safe for me to climb in. And when I moved to the cities, I competed in my first tree climbing competition, and I jokingly brought the judges this saddle and asked them if I could climb on it for the competition, pretty much 100% as a joke, but was surprised when he didn't immediately say no. The head judge told me that if I could prove to him that I had tested it as an assembly, not just as the components like I brake tested before, that he would be okay with me using it in the competition. So that's where this video series continues, is we went down a big rabbit hole getting behind that paywall and learning what it takes to build a saddle that you can self-certify to be a safe saddle to work and climb in. So if you want to see where that takes us, then join me in the next couple videos where we're going to talk about making an ASTM 877 compliant arborist saddle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.